This is the cross-style training camp, and we started on Wednesday night, and we're going through Monday night. This is actually the 30th cross-style annual training camp that we've had. So this camp is 30 years old. Whew, wish I was 30. But, wow, so it's interesting, the development and what the Lord has done. The camp was originally started to train interns to travel with us in the summertime when we went to the camp meetings. We always took three people who were called to preach and had a leaning towards evangelism. Mostly were in college, and we would train them in ministry to kids. We had puppet sets and we had all kinds of stuff. We'd train them in ministry to kids and to youth, and they would go to the camp meetings with us and enter into the teen program and enter into the kids program. So this was really a training for them. At the end of the week, we always started on Monday, went through Friday, and closed out the training camp on Friday noon. And then we would have, for the weekend, a cross-style conference, which would include Friday night service, Saturday night, Sunday morning. And we would have that, and the ones we trained would fit into that conference and handle the young people and would take care of the kids and minister to the kids, and it gave them kind of a launching for that. So people began to come, of course. We invited everybody to come to not to the training camp, but to the conference on the weekend. And so we had ladies, it's all their fault actually, this whole thing is all their fault, but ladies that came from Nova Scotia who would fly down and would be here for the training, for the conference. And they said, well, you guys started on Monday? Well, yeah, but that's not for you. Well, why can't we come? Well, I guess you could. So suddenly it began to be open to everybody for the whole week. So that's what we've been doing all this time. So it's been kind of a neat thing. And thank you for your participation in it this year. Next year, we're going to dump this. So this was an experiment to go over the weekend, holiday weekend. We're going to go back to the first full week of June, which will be the 5th through the 11th of next year. So we'd like to have you come. I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 27 again. Matthew chapter 27, again, is the chapter of the crucifixion. And it's introduced with chapter 26, which is a long chapter, 75 verses, and leads you into the crucifixion event. Again, we're given no physical details of the crucifixion event. Just what he says in verse 35, then they crucified him. But we're given all of these stories that surround the crucifixion, and we've been dealing with those stories. And this morning we want to look specifically, and we won't start by reading that, but keep it available and we'll come back to it. We're going to look specifically at verse 51, which has to do with the tearing of the veil. And in order to get into that, you need to know how significant the events are that lead up to this. And there is a chronological order of those events, which really becomes quite astonishing as you begin to understand it. You know, of course, that the Jews celebrated their day, Passover day, on Friday. Their calendar didn't shift. It wasn't sometimes on Thursday, sometimes on Friday. It didn't shift. The date was always the same. And it always happened on a Friday, the Passover. But their Friday wasn't like our Friday. We start our days at midnight and go through midnight. They started their days at 6 p.m. on Thursday through 6 p.m. on Friday would be the Passover day, which we would call Friday. So it started at 6 p.m., went through 6 p.m. That's how they calculated their days. One reason that's so important is that Jesus is celebrating the Passover with his disciples. They've made preparation all day Thursday, and now it's come at 6 o'clock on Friday, and they're in the upper room. There's the feet washing thing. There's the table all laid out for the celebration. And what they did in the celebration of the Passover was they rehearsed, went through, duplicated everything that they had done in Egypt land. Everything God had commanded in the Egypt Passover of the death angel, all that they went through. Slaughter, cooking of the lamb, slaughter of the lamb, all that, the blood on the doorpost. They rehearsed that. And it was quite a extensive thing. They would sing psalms and they would do this. They would go back to the psalms and sing some more psalms, and then they would do this. And then it progressed throughout the evening. And of course, Jesus added to that, and he instituted the Lord's Supper. And he talked about his body, and he talked about his blood. And he told them and warned them what was going to take place in his death and resurrection. They probably closed that up, got done with all of that celebration about 11 o'clock at night. So from 6, we'll say, to 11, we're not sure, but 6 to 11, they've been celebrating the Passover. Now they're on their way down. They're going down to the garden, and Jesus is going to go to prayer. And on his way down to the Garden of Gethsemane, they're following him. And you get this conversation being carried on. And Peter is strong on the fact that he will not deny. And Jesus is saying, yes, you will. And you will scatter like sheep. And he says, no, everybody else, you can't count on like John, I'll tell you that. You can't count on that, but you can count on me, Jesus. I'll go to the death with you. And of course, it wasn't true. And Jesus knew that. Finally, they've reached the garden. We'll say it's midnight. Right at midnight, and Jesus enters into prayer at the garden. And as you look in chapter 26, he has 3 sessions of prayer. He tells his disciples, the core group, to stay out here, pray with me, watch with me. He goes in to the inner part of the garden and begins to enter into prayer. He comes back and finds them asleep. And he says, could you not have watched with me 1 hour? So we would calculate from that the prayer went 1 hour, from midnight to 1. He leaves them, they wake up, he leaves them, goes back to prayer, prays another hour, comes back, they are asleep. Goes and prays another hour, comes back, they're asleep. He wakes them up and says, it's time, it's all going to come down now. Get up on your feet, guys. We're going to hit it hard. So it's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden torches are blazing, and there's a multitude of people. Some are soldiers, some are just ruffians, some are Sadducees and Pharisees, and then leading the whole pack, as you know, is Judas. And they all come thundering through the garden right up to Jesus, and the Judas plants the kiss, which was the sign that Jesus was the one, and calls him Master. And Jesus just shakes his head and looks at Judas and says, my, my. And they surround Jesus and capture him. And it's in that scene, of course, that Peter yanks out his sword and his dagger and starts whacking away, tries to cut off a guy's head, misses and cuts off his ear. And Jesus says, put that thing away, reaches down, grabs hold of the ear, puts it back on the guy's head, and calmly goes with them. There are 3 secular, or religious rather, 3 religious trials that then take place. They take Jesus, remember this is 3 o'clock in the morning, they take Jesus into Annas' house. He's the old high priest. He's the high priest of old high priests. And they take him into his house, and they have a little interview. It's not really a big deal, but it lasts for maybe 10, 15 minutes, who knows? And they have that little trial there as Annas analyzes and threatens Jesus. Then they drag him out of there and take him down to Caiaphas' house, who is the son-in-law of Annas, and he is the one who is really functioning as the high priest at this point. And it becomes quite a deal there, because again, we call it a mock trial. The reason we call it a mock trial is because it was done at night, and you cannot try a man for his life in the night hour, because you're not thinking right. You've been up all night, you're not clear, you're not objective. You don't have a right to do that. It has to be in the daytime. But they had this mock trial, and they brought in people, paid them to lie. Can you believe this? Paid them to lie. And they made all kinds of accusations, like, well, he said, if you destroy the temple in 3 days, I'll rebuild it. See, they had no idea what they were talking about. And they accused him and went after him. In fact, it got so heated and it got so hot. It it was like a demonic flow. They got so out of control that they just literally lost themselves and went over and grabbed his beard and yanked it out and spit on him and slapped his face and mutilated and beat him. And again, you are physically incapable of yanking a guy's beard out. Next time you see a bearded man, try it. You can't do it. It's a demonic thing. See, there was overwhelming demonic involvement, no doubt, in this, we know. And so finally, what is it, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning? They shoved Jesus in a little room, went and caught a little nap. Now it's the crack of dawn. Crack of dawn. Light is just appearing. They've grabbed Jesus out of the room. They've had a 5-second trial, which rubber stamps the mock trial they had. So those are the 3 secular trials. So now that's over. They're dragging him down the stairway. There's the whole Judas thing that we've talked about. And Judas ends up throwing the money back and goes out and hangs himself. And they want to get Jesus down to Pilate. So this is what? 6 o'clock in the morning, man. They're dragging Jesus down the street, taking him to Pilate's palace. The crowd hasn't hit the streets yet. They want to get this all over and done with and get him crucified before the crowd begins to stir. They've come outside Pilate's palace. They won't go in. He's a Gentile. Jews don't go into Gentiles' homes. Who knows what they've been doing in there? It might get all over us. So it's a defilement thing, you know. So they're standing outside. Yeah, you can kill somebody, but you can't go into a Gentile house. You got to get the rules right here, boys. So, wow, they're standing outside, you know, and Pilate gets out of bed, wipes his eyes, got his robe on, his hair's all messed up, comes out on the patio, on the balcony, and looks at this crowd yelling and screaming about Jesus, and we want him crucified. And Pilate looks at all this, and then you move into the 3 secular trials. The first one is the fact that Pilate, of course, is on the spot, so he tries to get himself organized and cleaned up, and he interviews Jesus and goes through, what is your accusation, and goes through all of this. And finally, Pilate comes out to the crowd and says, hey, I find nothing wrong with this guy. I don't know what to tell you. You want him dead, go kill him yourself. But we can't do that. It's against Roman law, and that was true. And so Pilate finally says, well, he's not really under my jurisdiction. So he kicked him off to Herod, who happened to be in town. And so they sent him down to Herod, and the second secular trial took place. And Herod poked fun at him and made a little fun and had a little time with him and wanted him to do a miracle, and he wouldn't do it. And Jesus wouldn't talk to him and wouldn't say anything to him. And Herod finally said, hey, it's none of my business, send him back. So now he's back before Pilate, and you got the 3rd secular trial going on. Now, Pilate doesn't know what to do. His wife is talking to him. That's always a bad sign when your wife sends you a note, brother. And she says, whoa, don't you mess with this. Don't you mess with this. Hey, something's going on. You stay away from this. But how can he? They backed him into a corner. He's in trouble. And he dare not have trouble with the Jews, because he's already had so much trouble with the Jews that if he has any more, Caesar will hear about it, and Caesar will take over, and he'll lose his position and all of his money, and it'll be awful. And so he doesn't know what to do. He's got to handle this. And he comes up with a slick idea. Barabbas on the one hand, Jesus on the other hand. We'll turn one of them loose. Which one do you want? And they scream for the release of the wild, mean, nasty, evil, slit your throat, rob you blind guy, Barabbas. We want him. We would rather have meanness and hatred and awfulness than we would purity and righteousness and love and compassion. So Pilate had no choice, turned Barabbas loose and took Jesus and turned him over to the soldiers. And then you have that scene in the Praetorium, which was their barracks. There was about 600 to 800 of these soldiers and one Jesus. They went at him. And you know what their whole deal was? Kingship, brother, kingship. And they made fun. And they put a scarlet robe around his shoulders and mocked him and, spit on him and anointed him with their spit. And they took some thorns and put them together and put a crown on his brow and beat it into his head. And you're a king. So they got a reed weed. You're king of the reed weeds. Put it in his hand. And they danced around and beat on the crown of thorns as it went into his brow and screamed, "Tell us which one of us did that," as they had blindfolded him before they did it. And they mocked him. And finally, when their little fun was done, what time is it now? It's probably pushing 9 o'clock. The scourging is over. The fun time is done. They drag him out, and now they're going through making the parade. Maybe it's 8. They're dragging him through the streets, and the whole scene of Simon carrying his cross and all of that takes place. They finally end up on Calvary, and it's about 9 o'clock to 10 when he's actually nailed. Here he is. Now, 9 o'clock in the morning in Jewish time bracket is the 3rd hour. And from the 3rd hour to the 6th hour, which would be 9 to noon, the crowd is milling around. See, Jesus is not all that far up, you know. It isn't like he's way up there. You can touch him. You can stand at the base of the cross and touch him. And they're throwing stuff and making fun and all these accusations. You saved others, you can't save yourself. Whew, if anybody preached the truth, that was it. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot save yourself and others at the same time. You have to lose yourself.
Amen.
And Jesus knew that. You saved others, you can't save yourself. Hey, you trusted in God, look where it got you. If you really trusted in him and you really got a hotline to him, what are you doing up there, son? And the fun went on and on. And then it's noon. Can you see it? It's verse 45. The noon hour, 6th hour till the 9th hour. That'd be noon to 3. There was darkness. We read this last night. There was darkness over all the land. Wow. Over all the land. Darkness. When the sun should be at its brightest, darkness took place. And Jesus in that time period cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And look at verse 47. Some of those who stood around and heard that said, "This man is calling for Elijah." And immediately one of them ran and took the sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, offered it to him to drink. The rest said, let him alone. Let's see if Elijah will come to save him. Now the Elijah thing is, he was the forerunner, you remember. Elijah, some thought he was going to be, this Elijah would actually be the old prophet Elijah raised from the dead that would come back and lead the parade, and he would be the bodyguard of the Messiah. So they're saying, Elijah, his bodyguard, if he's the Messiah, Elijah will come and rescue him. Let's hang around and watch. But there was no rescue. No rescue. And then verse 50. Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded, this is so significant, yielded up his spirit. Well, who killed Jesus? Wasn't the Romans. Who killed Jesus? Wasn't the Jews. Who killed Jesus? Nobody killed him. He yielded up his spirit. Do you know you can't do that? See, I can't just stand here and say, I think I'll die right now. I'm gone. I can't do that. See, I have to slit my wrist, cut my throat. I have to take pills. I have to jump in front of a truck. I got to do something. This is a voluntary, overwhelming, significant, okay, it's time. And he yielded up his spirit. Then, look at the next verse, verse 51. Then, behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And the earth quaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened. Then, behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two. What's the significance of that? Did you get the time, Ellen? Noon, 6th hour, till 3, 9th hour. It's dark. It's after 3 o'clock that Jesus yields up his spirit. Say 3:30. All this is still going on. What was so significant about that? He yields up his spirit. Well, let me tell you what else was going on at this moment. See, every year, hundreds of years, the Jews have been doing this. On the same day, at the same time. See, they never missed on this one. This is the Feast of the Passover. This is the premier feast of all feasts. You may mess around with the Feast of Lights, and you may mess around with some other things, but you don't mess with this. Because this is when the high priest is actually going to take the Passover lamb. Now, every family had their own Passover lamb. I got that. And they all had their lamb slaughtered in the temple. And during that week time, 250,000 lambs were slaughtered in Jerusalem with the families that had gathered in. So it was phenomenal. In fact, the sanitary system of Jerusalem was a series of brooks and that would run out, and they all revolved around the temple, and it would all run out. So can you imagine 250,000 lambs, and the way they slaughtered a lamb is they held his head back, slit his throat, caught the blood in a basin, and threw it at the base of the altar, and then it was washed away. So those brooks were running red with the blood of the lamb. And now, the Passover day, the premier, the time, the moment, this is the significant hour when lots of other Passover lambs have been offered for the families, but this is the one for Israel. And you know how the temple is. At the core of the temple is a tent, two rooms, and it's the holy place and the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies, of course, is sacred because God dwells there. And in front of the Holy of Holies is this veil. Now, it's not a curtain. It's a veil. You can read about it in the Old Testament. It's humongous. It's thick. It's about 8 inches thick. I mean, it's not just, the wind doesn't blow it. Let's say that. Yeah, I mean, this thing is wow. And there's this veil. Well, you have to have that there because God lives there, and here's the veil, and then here's the holy place. And this is a protection. This is a guard. You don't want to accidentally stumble in on God. So this is, wow. The veil is there. The high priest is out here in the holy place. And as is tradition, year after year, hundreds of years, they've done this same thing. At 4 o'clock on that Friday, they always offer the Passover lamb. Can you hear the clock ticking? Comes up 4 o'clock. The high priest grabs a hold of the head of the lamb, pulls his head back, grabs a hold of his knife, and starts to slit the throat of the lamb. And just as his knife touches the throat of the lamb and slits that throat and the blood begins to run, do you understand? Out on the cross, there's a man crying, yielding up his spirit. What a coincidence. Oh, come on. Do you think somebody has a plan? Who on earth organized that one? Who got that? Who got that time? Nobody wanted to crucify Jesus on Friday. The Passover? Nobody wanted to do that. In fact, if you read the beginning of chapter 26, you'll read that the Pharisees got together and said, we got to kill him, we got to kill him. And they didn't know how to do it and didn't know what to do, but they came up with one conclusion from their meeting: we will not get him during the Feast of the Passover. We won't do that. Here he is. You think they're in charge? They are not in charge, son. And there is a divine hand involved. And while the lamb's head is pulled back and the high priest has grabbed his knife and touched the throat of the lamb, the lamb is yielding up his spirit and has become the once and for all sacrifice for the sins, my sins. Wow. Now, follow this through. He's grabbed a hold of the head of the lamb. He's got his knife, slitting the throat. Jesus is yielding up his spirit. And at that very moment, he hears this, "Rip!" Can you see the high priest? He turns around, looks at the veil, and it's ripped from top to bottom. He makes a point of that. In other words, no one came along with a chainsaw and ripped it up. This is like two gigantic hands came down, grabbed a hold of the top of it, rip! And the high priest turns around and says, and can you see his eyes are bugged out? His mouth is wide open. His chin's on his chest. He's going, whoa! This is so startling. This is, what? Because this is protection. This is, oh my. This is, and the veil is ripped from top to bottom. And did you note the passage, verse 51? Then, behold, you know what the word behold means? Pay attention. Hey! It's a red flag. Hey! Do you know what God has done? See, we're going through our little rigmarole, our little church thing, our little ceremony. We've always done it. Oh my, we yawn through the sermon, we do the thing, we take up the offering, we dismiss. Oh, glad he didn't preach too long. And we've always grabbed a hold of the head and slit the throat, and we've done this 1,000 times, and it's no big deal, and it's no big hurry, and everything's going to be okay. And all of a sudden, God has just ripped the veil from the top to the bottom and shaken my entire world. And said, hey, I'm trying to tell you something. See, what would God have to do to get our attention? I know what he'll do. He'll fill a sky full of angels and sing about joy to the world. And some shepherds heard. That's it? Yeah, we went on with our business. Man, I got to get up at 4:30. I don't have time for this. I know what I'll do. I'll produce a virgin birth. What? You think that got my attention? Probably mythology. See, that didn't shake my world. That didn't bother me. That's no big deal. No big deal. See, what does God have to do? A star shows up in the east, and wise guys are running all over the countryside and coming to Jerusalem and saying, hey, there's a new king. Well, brother, we got a committee meeting. See, that didn't get us. That didn't get us. See, what does God have to do to shake us at the temple is big business, and we're selling lambs, and we're taking offerings, and come on. Can you see the high priest? He's grabbed a hold of the head, slit the throat, just as he does. Two gigantic hands come down. Rip! He turns around. What? He gets out his cell phone and calls the seamstress. Get out here and sew that thing up, man. We don't have time for this. Get that. See, God is trying to get through to us. And what would God have to do in your life to get your attention? Now, please be clear on this. You're saying God's going to do something nasty to me? No. But he certainly allows stuff, doesn't he?
Amen.
Now, it is the prodigal son scene, and the father, we recognize the father isn't home. He's sitting on the front porch, tears streaming down his face, weeping every day, longing for his boy to come. He didn't create the pig pen. He didn't create the mess, but he certainly allowed it. He didn't go get him. See, how many pig pens will it take to get me back? See, what will God have to allow in my life for me to come and fall at his feet and say, hey, I'm in. What would he have to allow? Would a good divorce do it? which is close to death. Would that kick me in the teeth and I'd finally, wow. Would he have to throw me in jail? What? How about a good dose of cancer? Would that do it to you? Hey! And all the time what you've got going on in the passage is you've got this loving God who's weeping over Jerusalem saying, okay, I'll take the most sacred thing you got going in your life and I'll rip the thing down the middle. Will that help you wake up? Will that get through to you? Will that get your attention? Well, okay, God, you got my attention. What are you trying to say to me? Well, there's about 3 of these, and we don't have time for any of them. But the first one is revelation. First one is revelation. You know what God is trying to do? He's trying to reveal. What do you mean reveal? Well, do you understand what's behind this veil? Well, God lives there, I know. How do you know that? Well, I read it in the Bible. Okay. Did you know there's furniture in there? There is? Yeah. Ark of the Covenant. Really? Gold-plated on top. Right? Have you ever seen it? No. It's in there? Yeah. Does God have chairs? Does he sit in there? Does he have a TV? What's he do all day in there? What's all the furniture that's in there? What's it all about? Why would it be in there? Does anybody go in there to dust? No. Does God do his own house cleaning? I don't know. See, nobody goes in there, brother. Why? Because the whole thing is what the scripture calls a mystery. That you can't figure out. And that there's been this overwhelming mystery of God. And you understand it's scary. The mystery is scary. Because what you don't know scares you. So we're scared to death of this. Which is part of the reason for the veil. See, we've discovered you can't have God running wild. Because people die. I mean, we found that out. We took the Ark of the Covenant that God lives in, we put it on a cart, man, and we were driving down the road, and we hit a bump. Hey, I'm a nice guy. I reached out and grabbed all of the Ark so it wouldn't fall off. Dropped dead. I dropped dead. Of course, you don't put your hand on God and live. Can you imagine what would happen if God came to everybody's house to eat breakfast? Whoa, we'd all die. So you just can't have that. So we put him in this little cubicle, but then that has to be. We went through the Mount Sinai thing, where God came down and lightning and fire and whoa, thunder and oh, man, it scared the whole earth quaked, and we got so scared. We said, Moses, you go talk to him. We don't want anything to do with this. And prophets were born. Moses became the first prophet, so God had to have prophets so that they would talk to him and then come and tell us, because we didn't want anything to do with this. Because it's scary. There's this overwhelming mystery. We can't figure it out. And the veil. Do you understand what's happening here? Jesus has just yielded up his spirit. The Lamb has just been, and the Lamb has just been, wow. This thing is just, and then rip! And the mystery is out. There are no more, woo! There are no more secrets. God has revealed himself. Amen. You got to be kidding me. Let me read this to you. The mystery. The mystery. This is Colossians 1:26. The mystery which has been hidden from ages and from generations, but now has been revealed to his saints. To them God willed to make known what are the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. And the mystery, it wasn't about a murder. It wasn't about a drama. The mystery, it wasn't about secret ingredients. The mystery, folks, it wasn't about intertwinings. The mystery, you know what the mystery was? a person. Jesus. Wow. And the whole revelation of God was suddenly displayed in Jesus. And everything that was scary, and everything that was, oh man, touch the ark, you die stuff. Everything that was, oh, it's dangerous, we got to keep God locked in. See, we didn't have a veil there to protect us or to protect God. We didn't have a veil there to protect God. You know, he didn't want us coming in on him just any old time. So he put a veil there. No, the veil was there to protect us. Because God is dangerous. Now, rip! And God is safe. I can jump in his arms. I call him Papa. He invades my flesh. He's safe. See, it's no longer dangerous to have God in your mind. It's no longer dangerous to have God in your emotions because he brings you stability. See, it's not dangerous to have him in your mind. He gives you wisdom. It's not dangerous to have him in your nervous system. He gives you settledness, relaxation. See, it's no longer dangerous to have him in your relationships. Why? Because he brings people together. He unites homes. See, it's no longer dangerous to have God in the guilt of your life, for he brings forgiveness and he brings peace. And he stepped out. The veil has been ripped. Grab the head, slit the throat, yielded up the spirit, rip! Now let me tell you the stupidest thing in the world. High priest, can you see him? Eyes bugged out, mouth wide open, chin on his chest. He turns around, what? God is out! Grabs his cell phone, calls the seamstress. Sew that thing back up! Get God back in there! Why? Well, we want to go on with our little laws. We want to maintain our little ceremonies. We got lambs to slaughter and lambs to sell. And we can't get that thing sewed back up. We want to go back? Yeah. You want to go back to guilt, back to weakness, back to trauma, back to the pig pen? See, that's not the story of the prodigal. I want to go back. Oh, I miss the pigs. What? As a kid growing up, I pictured the church as having windows that had bars in it, like the jail. Bars. How would they keep us in here? For an hour. And we're all looking through the bars of the window saying, can hardly wait till this is over. What? And a guy gets up, and says, oh, I want to tell you what I've sacrificed for Jesus. What I've given up for Christ. What I've set aside for God. What? You know what Peter says? Peter says going back, what I gave up was like dog vomit. Can you imagine a guy looking out the bar and saying, oh, sure miss my dog vomit. I really miss my dog vomit. Did I give anything up? Oh. Do you understand what I got to take on? Do you understand? Rip! And the revelation, the mystery, the hiddenness. And ladies and gentlemen, do you get it? We live, oh, how privileged you are. We live, oh, how fortunate I am. We live in a moment of time when the full revelation of what God wants to do in the human life is ours. Amen. Well, grab that, sew that thing back up, man. I want to go on in my dog vomit. What's wrong with you? Oh, forgive me, Jesus. Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. For I have done that. I have grabbed the cell phone. I have tried to sew it back up. I have tried to put you in a box. And Lord, we really have never minded having a God. There's something within us that wants a God. And we've never minded having a God. As long as you just don't mess with me. Would you just? We don't mind having a God if you stay in your place. We don't mind you being around God if you just don't interfere with what I want to do. I got plans and I got... But the veil is ripped. And Jesus, you are here. And I'm seeing clearly that everything I have accumulated and everything I've wanted and everything I've fought for and all the guilt and all the... Lord, it was dog vomit, man. It was dog vomit. And I want to give myself to you. It's safe, isn't it? You are safe. As C.S. Lewis said, you are dangerous. Aslan, you are dangerous. But you're safe. What would it take, God, for you to get my attention and rip the veil in my life? Heads are bowed. Again, no pressure. This is not psychological manipulation. Hey, what's going on in you, I can't create, friend. I can't create it. But God is ripping the veil in your life. He's been doing that again and again and again. And maybe you say, well, I am a Christian and I do believe in Jesus. Yeah, but he keeps ripping the veil because there's more. He's pulling on you. He wants to take you deeper. He wants to show you himself in greater ways. You've put him in a box. You've kept him in the closet. You've kept him at arm's length. Would you embrace him in a greater way today? So hey, our altar's open. It's not an obligation, it's an opportunity. And man, don't stay in your dog vomit. There's a God who is safe, who has destiny for your life. So just some moments of seeking. So, you want to join me? We'll kneel together.